Last week, I talked about proactive health and the common mistakes that we make to try to lose weight and achieve our health goals. And today, Meghan Donnelly, our lead dietitian from the 60-Day Reset, is going to give us some nutrition strategies for proactive hormone health that she uses to help her private clients and members of our Skinny 60 community. Megan and I have been working together for over 6 years now and have helped thousands of people with personalized nutrition solutions. She is the Director of Health Communications at the Celiac Disease Foundation and specializes in digestive health and women's health. And her experience spans everything from clinical practice and nutrition counseling to working with medical nonprofits in the food industry. She works a lot with weight management and disordered eating and digestive disorders like IBS and SIBO, celiac disease, heart disease, kidney disease. And she also works a lot with food intolerances and is a Monash University certified FODMAP practitioner. What I love about Megan is she makes science and nutrition simple and accessible. And she's going to give you some great tips today. So let's get the skinny from Megan Donnelly. Megan, whenever we get ready to do one of these podcast interviews, it just feels like an extension of one of our calls in the 60-Day Reset because we speak every Monday night. So talking about hormone health, let's just start from what are hormones so that we're all starting from the same knowledge base.
Yeah, they're actually, you can think of them like chemical messengers. They're created by various endocrine glands throughout the body, and they're created all over the body, and they all have different functions depending on kind of where they're created. Their main function really is to send signals throughout the body and help coordinate more complex systems like growth and metabolism and fertility and a number of other things, but those are some of the main ones.
Yeah, they just control how we feel. And it's so complex, and everybody's system is affected differently. So, what are some of the things that just mess with our hormones and get in the way of this messaging system sending the right messages around our body?
And it's actually a lot of things, and probably it's the combination of a lot of them that really gets people. So things like Western diet, that is high in highly processed foods, having a sedentary lifestyle, age, chronic stress, environmental toxins, nutrient deficiencies, and even not eating enough can affect your hormone regulation.
Yeah, I want to dive into some of this because there's so many things that affect and disrupt the balance in our bodies. And we just don't talk about disordered eating enough. And I love the education that you give the members of our community about disordered eating because we typically only think of eating disorders as anorexia, bulimia, obesity. So how do you think of disordered eating? What's a way to frame it so that we can all understand that we may in fact be engaging in behaviors that are sending our body out of balance?
Yeah, I mean, as a dietitian, I'm always thinking about the why behind the decisions that we make with food. And so, really, eating behaviors play a big role in that. Behaviors like binging and purging, which people might think of as more traditional signs of an eating disorder, but there are many disordered eating patterns that I don't think people realize are disordered. Things like obsessively limiting your calorie intake, being preoccupied with clean eating, abusing laxatives, eating late at night, especially binging late at night, over exercising, yo-yo dieting, preoccupation with food, regurgitation of food. There are lots of behaviors that can be considered disordered, and also that can be maladaptive. And really what we mean by that is that they're behaviors that you start to do in response to something that you're trying to control. And so that's a maladaptive eating behavior.
Yeah, we see this a lot, don't we, in our community, where when we start talking about this, and I remember you giving a bunch of examples of disordered eating where it's become normalized, where you replace your breakfast with just a cup of coffee. And then it just becomes this socially acceptable habit because a lot of people do it. And then you were talking about, oh, well, what about if you're working all day and at 5 o'clock, you all of a sudden look look at your day and you go, I haven't eaten anything. And the whole day has gone by. And it's not even necessarily that you consciously set out to do that, but it just gets away from you. And everybody on the video call, just you could see everybody's faces going, oh, I'm doing some of those things, So it's really interesting to be reframing it like this. So what happens in the body when we don't nourish our bodies with balanced nutrition and don't eat regularly throughout the day? Just physiologically, what happens?
Yeah. It's really important to recognize that it's not going to look the same for everyone. I think people tend to associate thinness or a certain look with having a lot of control around food. And there's a lot of genetic variability there. Not everyone looks the same. But the physical effects are damaging regardless of your body size. Your metabolism actually slows down. Um, that is kind of a adaptive response to your body trying to keep you alive. Your body's trying to prevent you from starving. So your metabolism is going to slow down. Your metabolic rate will slow down so that you burn fewer calories at rest. And it does this by slowing down your heart rate, reducing your blood pressure, slowing down your digestion, and even reducing your blood flow and circulations. So you're going to feel the effects of that. A lot of times, though, the thing that people start to feel is low energy and brain fog. Your brain can't function very well when it's not nourished properly. And sometimes people don't associate that with undernourishing, but it is a very common thing. A lot of people say, oh, I don't feel hungry. That's why I don't eat during the day. And maybe you don't experience traditional signs of hunger, and maybe that's because you've trained your body over the years to ignore those things, but your brain still feels the effects. And so sometimes people don't really make that connection.
Yeah, that's always another light bulb moment when we're on one of our calls every week and, a member will ask a question and say, oh, and well, when was the last time that you ate? You may simply need to eat something. And everybody's face just goes, can it really be that simple? And we all laugh, don't we, together? Because yes, we need to be eating. And also, isn't that a great thing? Because food's just so yummy, right? So I mean, I love to eat throughout the day regularly. What about the digestive component? Like what happens to our digestion when we don't eat regularly?
Everything slows down. So your body can't initiate the muscular contractions of the digestive tract, which is called peristalsis. You really can't do this very well because you don't have enough energy. So some of the symptoms of that people might experience are feeling very full very quickly after a small amount of food. Some people experience constipation, particularly if they're eating a lot of raw vegetables and things, but not much else. That's a form of calorie restriction. That's something we see a lot. And then, bloating and abdominal pain and things that, we kind of think they're normal symptoms, and to an extent they can be, but it can be a sign that you're just not digesting your food very well. And so you might get some of those more functional digestive symptoms.
And we typically think of gas and bloating as a byproduct of eating too much. We don't think of it as eating too little. It's so interesting what you're saying, even though you and I speak every week. I still have my own light bulb moments as we're talking about these things. What about the effects to our organs, like our liver function and things that are so necessary for detoxification in the body? They all start to not function properly as well, right?
Yeah, so I mean, your body is basically trying to reduce the functions that it deems as less necessary to keep you alive. So all organs can be affected. Your liver will not detox as well as it should. Some people experience blood sugar dysregulation, especially hypoglycemia, which is low blood sugar. And on a chronic basis, that can be a problem, especially if you're not consuming energy on a regular basis. You're going to have more dysregulation in terms of blood sugar. Some people experience poor wound healing or more bruising. In extreme cases, bone density issues. And then, of course, there's things like issues with hair, skin, and nails. Those tend to be they become affected pretty quickly, actually. A lot of people get very like thinning hair and very brittle nails, and skin that just doesn't have that same plumpness, I guess, that it should.
Yeah. Yeah, and the nail splitting, and that is so common. We hear that a lot, don't we? And obviously the thinning hair is, also a symptom of your hormones being out of balance, and a lot of women, have thinning and hair and hair loss during menopause specifically. I want to go back to this blood sugar piece because, again, it's something that just gets ignored a lot. And it's such an important indicator of health at any age. But as we get older, it becomes even more important to be mindful about regulating our blood sugar. And we often ignore the signs of low blood sugar or high blood sugar. So, what are some of those signs to look out for where our body is definitely giving us those signs that we need to be eating something?
One of the most common ways I can relate to people on this is describing it as feeling hangry. That is a sign of low blood. When your brain is so affected by your lack of nutrition that it starts to you get mood swings, right? That's absolutely a sign. But there are a number of other things: nausea, acid reflux, actually feeling like you have a sour stomach when you eat a little bit of food. That could be a sign that you waited too long before you ate, so
Yeah.
you had too long of a gap between your meals. Um, but brain fog really is one of the biggest ones I see. People just, we say it all the time, I get this slump at 3 o'clock and I need another cup of coffee. And I'm like, that's what was in your lunch? How long ago was your lunch? That probably means you need food if you experience brain fog every day at the same time. Um, I think your starvation puts your body into fight or flight mode. And so all of the normal things you would think about when your body's fighting something, that's really what's happening. And you're also releasing stress hormones in your body.
Yeah, well, it's just so fascinating that we have just been ingrained to believe that the only way to be skinny, to lose weight, is to restrict, to eat less, to exercise more, and that's the formula. And in actuality, the most efficient path to achieving those goals is to actually eat more often, eat smaller meals more often throughout the day. And this is such a huge part of the education in Skinny 60 that surprises a lot of women, doesn't it? When you are constantly giving people this message every day, and we hear this, don't we? I'm losing weight and feeling better than I have, eating more than I ever have in my life. I'm just shocked. But when you're eating really quality foods and in appropriate quantities and in a way that is strategic for your needs, everything just starts opening up. So I want to ask you about this thesis that you did when you were at NYU about snacking and late night snacking. And then I want to ask about snacking because, again, there are so many misconceptions around it. So when we're snacking in an appropriate way that's efficient, it's so great for the body. So what have you learned about that in your years of being a dietitian?
Yeah. So when I was in grad school, I did a study on night eating, and we were looking at diet quality and body weight, the impact of eating at night. And we were using a night eating screener that was, it was validated to, it was a validated tool to diagnose night eating disorder. So it was a disordered eating tool. But we found that eating at night was associated with poor diet quality and unhealthy body weight. And the poor diet quality was really, it was interesting because we found that these people overall had lower intake of fruits and vegetables in general, and they had much higher intake of salty and sugary foods, which the diet quality screener we used didn't actually get into what those foods were, but you can assume that a sweet and salty food is probably like a snacky type of food, right? And then the body weight piece was interesting. We found that when we said unhealthy body weight, these people tended to fall in the underweight and the obese range of the BMI scale, which tells me that this eating at night was really wreaking havoc on their health in a number of ways. And it's very likely that there were other issues going on with these people leading, perhaps other forms of eating disorders. But just, I want to reiterate that, there's a lot of digestive problems that happen when you're undernourishing, but also when you're eating close to bedtime. Your body needs that time to rest so that it can properly do all the functions that you need to do while you're sleeping, all those restorative functions. And so eating close to bedtime, especially large volumes of food, it's really bad for your digestive system. I mean, if you think about it, just thinking about gravity, laying horizontally does not help food move down your digestive tract, which is really just one long tube from your mouth to your rectum. So it's kind of interesting when you just think about it like that. It's all just kind of sitting there flat and not moving, which, it's not helpful. So it's just, there's a lot to the reasons why eating at night and close to bed is not recommended. We recommend cutting off your eating time about 3 to 4 hours before bedtime to help with digestion, to help with the restorative functions of sleep, to help with blood sugar control, and also thinking about that diet quality study. So
Yeah, so conversely, when we snack on quality foods throughout the day and we eat regularly about every 3 hours or so throughout the day, then we don't actually need to snack at night and we can start to break that habit. And obviously, sometimes and very often, it's not a need for physical satiation, isn't it? It's a habit. We sit in front of the TV and we eat, or we have this particular thing at night. It becomes sort of a ritual that's about emotional, um, aspects of this as well. But talk to me about why snacking is a great thing when you're throughout the day when you're snacking on quality foods.
there are so many reasons. We tell people to try to not go more than 3 to 4 hours without any food. And the reason for that is really to give your metabolism the support that it needs in order to function well. So snacking has a number of benefits. I mean, it can, first of all, help curb your appetite so that you're not getting into this cycle of being starving before a meal, eating very quickly and in a way that is not very mindful, and getting overly full very quickly and getting into that. It's kind of like yo-yo eating, right? Like where you're just like so ravenous and that you have an overwhelming amount of food. Um, it's also giving you the nutrients that you need when you allow yourself to snack. We talk a lot about nutrient needs and how to meet them and what foods can help you meet those nutrient goals that you have, whether it be proteins, fats, and carbs, or vitamins and minerals. And it's really hard to achieve those nutrient goals when you are not consuming food often throughout the day. It's almost impossible actually to meet your
Yeah,
protein if you're not eating at least 4 times a day.
yeah.
So that's part of it. And then also this blood sugar piece. Maintaining your body likes to be in sort of a steady state in terms of blood sugar. You don't want to have large spikes followed by crashes. So you want to kind of giving your body fuel throughout the day makes you one more efficient at regulating your blood sugar, but also prevents those blood sugar dips because you have some carbohydrates that you're then able to use for energy. So there are a lot of benefits of snacking. And when we say snacking, we don't mean, what I think what people think of as traditional snacks. We mean consuming high quality foods throughout the day. So, for us, a snack is many things. It could be a few bites of leftovers. It could be a salad. It could be a number of whole foods that are helping you meet your nutrient goals, just spread out.
Yeah, it's interesting again too, isn't it? Just reframing what is a snack? What can a snack be? And when you say, to our participants and to your private clients, it can be just a few bites of leftover lunch or leftover dinner from last night. Everybody again, we all just look at each other. It's like, oh yeah, and instead of narrowing your choices, it actually opens them up. And I think that that's one of the many things that I love about you as a dietitian is that you're always focused on not what we're taking away, what we're adding, about expanding our options and never restricting things that don't need to be restricted. In terms of this blood sugar piece, obviously the 60-day reset is a digestive health reset. We're focused on gut health and how the gut is connected to hormones, metabolism, and blood sugar. It's fascinating to me. It continues to be, just how the human body works and when we work with the amazing things that can happen. So can you do an overview about just the basic biology of the gut brain connection and how it connects with our hormone health?
Yes, the gut brain connection is fascinating. We know now that your gut and your brain are physically connected by a network of nerves. And they also kind of work off of each other. So things that are happening in your gut can affect your brain, and things that are happening in your brain can also affect your gut. I work with digestive diseases, and we see time and time again that stress triggers many digestive symptoms, especially some of the ones that give people significant quality of life issues, things like diarrhea, bloating, gas, abdominal pain. A lot of times those are triggered by stress. On the flip side, your gut health affects how well your body can respond to stress. And a good example is that about 90% of your body's serotonin intake is produced in the gut. And what that means is that serotonin stimulates that network of nerves, specifically the vagus nerve, to produce more serotonin in your brain. And so having a gut that is producing these hormones actually can affect your mood very directly. So it's interesting as we learn about more of these connections, and I think where science is going is that we're really honing in on the fact that having good gut health actually can affect your overall well-being and your mental health, which is really fascinating.
Yeah, I want to talk further about this gut hormone connection. So it's really coming into the fore in the mainstream with the prolific usage of Ozempic and other GLP-1 agonist injections. So can you just explain what GLP-1 is and how that affects our hormone health and our overall health?
Yeah, so GLP-1 is a hormone that helps with appetite regulation. And so these GLP-1 mimicking medications are basically just supplementing what your body naturally makes of this hormone, GLP-1. GLP-1, though, it does have a gut health component. When you consume food, your gut microbiome, the microbes that live in your gut, actually ferment, and there are byproducts of that fermentation. Your gut microbiome produces a number of things, including vitamin K, but also short chain fatty acids. And these short chain fatty acids have different functions. One of these short chain fatty acids that is produced by gut microbiome fermentation is butyrate. And butyrate helps create the hormone GLP-1, which is important for maintaining hunger and fullness cues, as I mentioned, but also your metabolism. It affects how well you burn calories, and it can help prevent insulin resistance. And so it's a very, very important function. And making sure your gut microbes are getting the foods that they need in order to create these byproducts is something we talk about a lot, but the best information we have is that eating a lot of high fiber foods really is the best way to promote the stimulation of these byproducts.
So I want to connect the dots with this blood sugar piece. So GLP-1 is produced in the body, and a lot of it is produced in the gut. Then GLP-1 sends the message to insulin, doesn't it? Which is another hormone in the pancreas about how much is released to regulate our blood sugar, because we need the sugar to get into our cells where it's used for energy. So when we don't have enough GLP-1, that's when we can't process carbohydrates efficiently. Is that a good way to summarize it?
It's a great way to summarize it. And also, insulin is a hormone. And so, one hormone regulates the production and function of another.
Yeah. So when we're not our microbiome's not in balance and we're not producing enough of GLP-1, then it affects insulin, then it affects our blood sugar, then it affects, it affects our hunger, our leptin and ghrelin, our hunger and satiety hormones, and then it just starts to affect the whole system. And you talked about serotonin, one of the neurotransmitters, and then GABA and dopamine are some others, and we just start to not feel very good. So I just want to connect the dots a little bit further with these injections and why they're causing so many problems for people in these higher dosages. So people are taking these really elevated dosages of a synthetic form of GLP-1. It's like having 10 cups of coffee as opposed to 1 cup of coffee at a time, right? So just connect the dots further about why this is becoming so disruptive for people, specifically women over 40, and what we're seeing in terms of the adverse reactions of taking these peptides in huge quantities every day. Every week, I should say. You inject yourself once a week.
There are a number of concerns. I mean, first of all, they seem to have an effect on the digestive system in a way that slows it down. And so a lot of people start to experience that slow motility. And one of the telltale signs of that is getting full very quickly after a small amount of food and feeling very nauseous. They're starting to kind of figure that piece out. My understanding is that they're starting to give smaller doses to people to kind of see how they respond and try to manage that symptom, which is great. The other thing is that you're one of the things that happens with this medication is you end up in a metabolic state that is creating like a calorie deficit. It's not literally creating a calorie deficit, but you are eating fewer calories typically if you're on these medications because they affect your hunger and fullness cues. And so you're going to start to burn more calories. You're going to start to burn energy. You're going to start to burn your fat and your muscle tissue. Unfortunately, your muscle tends to be affected first. And so if you're not taking these medications alongside performing some strength training exercise, that has a really bad effect on your metabolism. If you have not a lot of lean body mass compared to fat, we know that that leads to a slower metabolism in general over time. So while you might see weight loss in the short term, in the long term, not having those muscle stores is actually going to be problematic for your metabolism. So I think there's a place for the use of these medications. I think unfortunately people who don't need them necessarily oftentimes are taking them and not being made aware of some of these side effects and how to prevent them. And I would argue that that gets you into this cycle of undernourishing your body and disordered eating patterns. And these are just a vehicle for that in a lot of cases. Of course, not everyone, but yeah, so it's just something to be aware of that this isn't a benign medication and it certainly needs to be taken alongside I would argue, a dietitian that really knows how to manage some of these things.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see the results that practitioners are getting by microdosing, taking much smaller doses, as you were just saying before, where it's actually effective. It's not as disruptive to hormones and balance in the body, and you can be doing other things in conjunction with it so that you are supporting the formation of better habits without having these nasty side effects. Watch this space, as we always say, right? Because we're just learning more and more about these things. But also, there's such a huge percentage of people where they try to titrate off of the injection and then they gain the weight back and then some. And so it's, what is it? They're saying over a third of people or two-thirds of people. I mean, it's just unbelievable, what's going on. So if you are on one of those injections, it's interesting to watch what people are doing by taking much lower dosages. But we have a lot of participants come into the program, don't we, who have been very disappointed with their journey with these injections long term, and it's causing all kinds of disruptions with their hormones. And for women going through menopause specifically, it doesn't do a lot to affect hot flashes and sweats and brain fog and all of these other symptoms that really affect your quality of life. So we're not just focused on weight. I just want to go back to what you were saying about muscle, where they're estimating that about half of the weight loss is muscle, or a large percentage of the weight loss is muscle. Can you just reiterate again why the lean muscle mass is so important for metabolism, but also for bone health?
Mhm. Yes, lean muscle tissue is more metabolically active than fat. So having more muscle is going to lead to a higher metabolic rate, and that's generally considered a good thing. But it's also holding your bones in place. You can think of it like scaffolding for your bones. And so if you don't have enough muscle on top of your bones, you're going to be at risk for other issues like fractures and injuries and things like that. Also, undernourishing in addition to not having a lot of muscle stores is probably going to lead to bone density issues in over time, because you just aren't going to be able to meet your nutrient needs and to protect those bones.
Yeah, that's another thing that I think we're going to see in the coming years and decades, is people that have been on a long-term usage of these drugs and what it's doing to their bone health long term. So we all know, as women past the age of 40, 50, 60, we're really looking at our bone health, and that can be problematic with, osteoporosis and so forth. So again, just something to consider when you're thinking about using these medications. Let's talk about what we can do to support better hormone health and better hormone function. So let's talk about what we can do to support better gut health. We've been talking about how important it is with regards to overall health, but how it connects to our hormones. What can we be doing to improve our gut microbiome?
Eating a lot of high fiber foods is one of the
Your
most.
favorite subject, fiber.
It is for a number of reasons, but eating a lot of plants. Plants have a, micronutrients, phytonutrients, important anti-inflammatory nutrients for your overall health, but they also have fiber, which is the food for your gut microbiome. So that's number one. Um, there was one study I always like to talk about when we have our weekly calls, is that there was a study where they looked at people who ate 30 plants per week and showed that they had healthier gut microbiomes than people who didn't have, or who had less than 30 plants per week. And I don't think like the 30 number is extremely important. I just think it's important in the sense that if you're eating 30 plants per week, you're getting a variety of plants,
Yeah.
right? It's got to be fruits and vegetables and nuts and seeds, and a lot of them at every meal and snack, probably. That is what I would tell people to take away from that, is that variety is important. Um, then hydration. Your digestive system does not work without water, and you need
And we
water.
get dehydrated as we get older.
Absolutely, we do. And so making sure you're hydrated, especially if you're consuming a diet that is high in fiber, if you are not hydrating well, you're going to experience blockage and constipation. It's a very unpleasant thing that people sometimes, when they're trying to change their habits, all of a sudden they get very bloated and constipated. Sometimes that is because they're not hydrating enough. So those are the biggest things. And then we also talk a lot about probiotic containing foods. People always ask about probiotics, and
And your response surprises everybody.
I like to turn people towards fermented foods, which naturally contain live probiotics, or most, I shouldn't say all fermented foods contain live probiotics, but certain fermented foods contain live probiotics that are plentiful and diverse in the species that they contain. And so I like to steer people towards fermented foods if they can tolerate them. Things like sauerkraut and fermented pickles, kimchi. Like there are a lot of good options out there now, and they're going to be the ones that you find in the refrigerator section of the grocery store. Um, those can be wonderful, and then you don't need to go out and buy a probiotic supplement, which might have bacteria that are no longer alive or unknown in terms of the quantities and the diversity of the species. So I like fermented food.
Yeah, yeah. One of the many things that everybody loves about you in our community is that you don't recommend supplements unless they're absolutely necessary. It's just this very much food forward, go to your regular grocery store, do these things. It's very simple. And going and spending $60 on these expensive probiotics may just not be what is required. And also, it's so fascinating, isn't it? The studies that are coming out now about the bioindividuality of everybody's microbiome, that it's like a fingerprint and everybody is different, and that actually the probiotic that you may be using may actually not be appropriate for you.
Mhm.
And it may not be the strains that your body actually needs. So it's just going to be so interesting how our knowledge expands with regards to that moving forward. It's fantastic. Let's talk about protein, because this is also a really big focus of our program, educating people about protein and why it's so important. So let's just connect the dots about the protein hormone connection as well, and why it's so incredibly important to be getting the appropriate amount of protein, particularly over 40.
Yeah, there are a number of hormones that are dependent upon the proteins you consume. So these hormones can regulate a number of things, especially growth, metabolism, even appetite and stress. But I mean, most of the hormones in your body are dependent on the energy that you take in. It's just a matter of, you know, which ones are stimulated by which food group. But it's kind of that's why I always tell people there's no magic like combination of macronutrients. You shouldn't demonize any specific macronutrient because they all affect your hormones in different ways. And so, yeah, protein is very important. And I would say, in order to build up your lean body mass, which is your muscle stores, as we were talking about before, you've got to make sure you're getting enough protein. And those processes are also dependent upon peptide hormones.
And so in terms of protein, this is another thing that really surprises people when we're talking every week and about nutrition education, that with protein, more is just more. So it's about what's appropriate. If you eat too little, your body doesn't function properly, you're low energy and so forth. If you eat too much, then it irritates, disrupts, and overwhelms the body. So how do we figure out how much protein we need? Like, what are the factors that determine what our protein needs might be?
It's dependent on a number of things, your body size, so your weight, also your age, your health status, and your activity level. Those are the main ones. There are some other ones, like if you're in the hospital, we might put someone on a super high protein diet if they have a wound that won't heal, for example. But for the most part, it's the things I mentioned before. And yeah, I mean, there are a number of calculations out there to calculate protein needs, and these are evidence-based methods. And yeah, we find that people who overdo it don't necessarily they don't have better health outcomes because they're having such large amounts of protein. Actually, your body tends to treat any macronutrient in excess like an excess nutrient that it's going to convert to a storage form of fat, right? So having too much protein isn't going to make it so that you can't produce fat in any energy storage. Um, any nutrient in excess is going to be stored as energy in the form of fat in the body, pretty much.
Yeah. So this is another piece of the education, that our bodies can only absorb so much protein per meal or snack. So a lot of people are loading up at night, but not eating protein throughout the day. And so this when you say this to people, I always ask you to repeat it, don't I? Because it's just so important. If you eat more protein than your body can assimilate, it gets stored as fat. And so it actually works against your weight loss goals, for example, and it can really disrupt your hormones and so forth. So it's just a really interesting piece of this. I just want to specifically for women over 40 in perimenopause, menopause, and postmenopause, just connect the dots with skin, bone health, muscles, and collagen production with regards to protein. And everyone's taking collagen supplements, but we can just be eating quality protein foods, right?
Yeah. You really, a lot of times you don't need those supplements. Yeah. Protein stimulates collagen production, actually, which affects your skin, your bone health, and your muscles. So, yes, there are people who are taking it in supplemental form, but if you're meeting your protein needs and getting a variety of protein sources in your diet, it's very likely that supplement's not going to do much for you.
Yeah. I want to go back to this macronutrient conversation, part of the conversation with protein, fats, and carbs. Oh, we love to talk about healthy fats, don't we? And thankfully, we're in an era where the word is out that fats are not only good for us, they're essential. But I want to connect the dots with hormone health. Why are healthy fats so critical for better hormone health?
They are the building blocks of many hormones. And so often, what I see is that people are not feeling satiated after meals, which we know is hormone, it's a hormone response, satiation. Um, and also, they're just not feeling very energized in between meals. They're not able to meet that 3 to 4 hour window that we recommend before your next meal. And a lot of times that's because of their fat intake. More often than not, actually, we're telling people you've got to have more fat with that meal.
Yeah. Yeah. And
And
they're
it,
yummy. Fats are delicious. They make us feel full, and they give us that yummy, gooey feeling when we eat things, And so it's always kind of a bit of another cause for celebration, isn't it? When people are looking at, the meal plans or the recipes or what you're talking about and going, wait a second, I can maintain a healthy weight and lose weight eating this much fat. And we go, yep. And then they all of a sudden start losing weight, going, this is so great. So in terms of healthy fats, what do you recommend are the foods that we gravitate towards for better health and better hormone health specifically?
so, olive oil, avocado oil, oils that come from high quality plant sources, also nuts and seeds are a big one. We use them a lot. And so, yeah, plant fats is what we prioritize. Um, Animal fats do have a role. They should have less of a I guess percentage of your diet than the plant fats, but yeah, for the most part, we're able to have people consuming both sources. It is kind of interesting with fats. I think people are afraid of fats because they have more calories than proteins and carbs. They're actually 9 calories per gram, whereas proteins and carbs are 4 calories per gram. And so sometimes people get afraid, like it's just a little bit, but it's so many more calories. But we know now that it's really about the quality of the calories that people are consuming, and that having these fats to kind of finish a meal make a big difference in terms of people's overall health. And we see time and time again that a lot of these hormonal things start to regulate when people are consuming all of the macronutrients often.
Yeah, I want to ask you about some of these quality animal fats that deliver omega-3s, for example, like, fatty fish and things like that. So what are the sources of seafood that you recommend for people that eat animal protein?
Wild caught fish primarily, and the fatty fish, because they do have these omega-3 fatty acids that are important for our brain and our heart. So um, wild caught salmon is a great example. There are some white fishes like cod and halibut when they're wild caught that can be very high quality. So just looking for something that contains these healthy fats, but then it ideally is wild caught, because wild caught fish contains a lot more nutrients than farmed fish, and it also has a lot less toxins than farmed fish.
Yeah, and you can get wild caught sardines too with the bones for
Yeah,
bone health, and they can be really great. And you're not anti canned fish in
no.
small quantities either, right? As long as it's high quality wild caught.
Yeah, there are a lot of reasons to consume canned fish. Part of it is that it lasts longer and you can get it from anywhere. You can buy wild caught Alaskan salmon wherever you are, right? So yeah, canned fish definitely has a place. I think it makes a lot of sense. It's an easy protein. Put it on a salad really easily. Like, yes, there's nothing wrong with canned fish in,
Yeah,
modern.
I think that's another surprise for people. We're just taught that anything in a can that's shelf stable is terrible, and it not necessarily so. So, just getting in a variety of things. I want to just touch on something you said before about we're talking a lot about plant foods and that everybody should be eating a lot of plants, but plant based has become synonymous with veganism, and they're not the same thing. So, we have a lot of different people in our community and people from with all dietary stripes. So there's people that are vegan, vegetarian, pescatarian, omnivore, eat all kinds of animal protein, but we all need to be plant based. So our diet is based in plants, and then we supplement with other quality foods of our choice. And so that's another part of the education that surprises people, that there isn't just one diet or one way of eating that works for every person. But we're working within these general nutrition parameters, which is eat a lot of plants. I want to go back to what you were saying about eating regularly throughout the day and just connect the dots a little bit further with thyroid health, because there's so many women over 40 that present with Hashimoto's, Graves, and other thyroid conditions, and this relationship between thyroid health, hormone health, and gut health, and what you were saying about eating regularly throughout the day. So, can you just explain to us about why our thyroid and our blood sugar and gut health, how it's all connected, and why we need to be paying attention to our thyroid function?
Yes, your thyroid is very affected by your nutrition status. So if you are undernourishing your body, one of the effects is that you're not going to be giving your thyroid the support that it needs to perform all of the complex functions that it needs to, including production of hormones. So what I think, and I think what a lot of dietitians are starting to understand, is that especially in women, history of yo-yo dieting and significantly reducing calorie intake has a very big impact on the health of the thyroid as we age, and is very likely a strong contributing factor to things like autoimmune thyroid disease. So yeah, I one of my goals is always to expand people's diets, but I'm always working on eating often and making sure you're getting enough in terms of protein and calories and fat and carbs as well, like all of the macronutrients, because your thyroid really depends on that nutrition and it can't perform all of the functions that it needs to without it. And remember, your thyroid regulates your metabolism. So this is really important that it's working well.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things that make you so effective in our community, but just meeting each person where they're at and helping them make the program work for their personality and lifestyle. And that what's going to work for one person is not the same thing as another person. With that in mind, what are some of the general foods that you recommend prioritizing to support better hormone health?
Omega 3s, which we've talked about, is a big
Yeah.
one. So including foods that actually I think in American style diets are not very common in our diet.
Yes.
Things like fatty fish and walnuts and flax seeds and chia seeds and hemp seeds. These foods are rich in omega-3 fatty acids, and I would argue it's important to consume them daily for brain and heart health and hormone health. And so Absolutely. I'm pushing omega-3s. I'm telling people to put a tablespoon of flax seeds at least every day or something like that.
And
Chia
that's good for
pudding.
constipation too. That's one of
Yeah.
your big ones, isn't
Oh
it?
yes, I know. I think flax and chia and hemp are like
Yeah.
superfoods.
Yeah, oh, they are.
But
They are.
but I mean, I was speaking with someone the other day who said to me, "You want me to eat more often? I'm not feeling very hungry. I want to get more omega-3s in my diet." And so we came up with, okay, one snack a day is just a quarter cup of walnuts. We're killing two birds with one stone. Like this doesn't have to be a complicated intervention, right? So things like little things like that can go a long way. I also talk about cruciferous veggies a lot. Cruciferous veggies are amazing. They have so much fiber, but they also have other properties that make them really beneficial, especially from an anti-inflammatory perspective. So they have what we call glucosinolates, which are associated with decreased inflammation and can actually help regulate estrogen levels by when you have excess levels of estrogen. These glucosinolates are thought to help convert it to a weaker form. Now, you would have to be consuming very large amounts in order to actually see that direct effect. But I think what we can take away from that is that cruciferous veggies are positive for your hormone health, right? For a number of reasons.
Yes.
And so we're talking about them all the time. Things like broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, kale. We recommend those as daily things for
Yeah,
people.
cabbages. I mean, there's so many, right? And for those of you that are listening going, "Ooh, I don't like any of those foods." Well, it's just about figuring out really delicious ways to prepare them because the way that you prepare them, what you serve them with really makes a dramatic difference. So we've turned many a crucifer hater into a lover, haven't we, Megan? It's all about figuring out what works for you, which is why again you're so effective as a dietitian because you're not extreme. It's just about, okay, all right, so let's look at what you do like. Let's look at what you can do. What's your family going to eat? What's possible for you? It doesn't have to just look one particular way. So I think therein lies the limitation with just googling a bunch of foods and going, oh, okay, well, I got to eat these foods, right? But it's about figuring out how it actually you can integrate these principles into your life, which is again why our program happens live so that you can help each person do that individually. You were talking about exercise before. I want to just connect the dots again between exercise and hormone health and how physical activity increases hormone receptiveness.
Mhm. Yes. So physical activity makes your cells what we call more insulin sensitive, meaning they are more easily able to utilize the energy that you're giving your body. So we talk about blood sugar and how when you eat a meal that raises your blood sugar. Well, that blood sugar has to go somewhere. It has to get into your cells. And insulin is the shuttle to get the blood sugar into your cells. And when cells become more insulin sensitive, that means they are more able to accept that energy so that you can use it efficiently. So exercise absolutely affects hormones. We know that sedentary lifestyle is affected with um, like negative hormone association, like negative levels of some of the hormones, like I would say unhealthy levels of these hormones. So, yes, but with insulin, it's important.
Yeah, oh gosh, there's so many things that we could keep talking about. As I'm sitting here going, oh gosh, I want the listeners to know about this and this and this. This is again why the two of us just geek out every week because it's just this knowledge is so important. But if knowledge was all we needed, we'd all Google or chat GPT our way to getting all of our goals. So I just want to talk to you about the difference working one on one with a dietitian as opposed to Googling some of this stuff. What would you say to someone who says, well, I can just Google all that stuff for free. Why do I actually need to work with somebody? What fascinates you about working personally with people and helping them figure it out?
Yeah, I mean, all of this information you can look up. I can look it up too. Like, that's how we learn. And having knowledge doesn't necessarily help you understand what's going on in your body. So I have a lot of clients that come to me and say, that they know all this information about gut health and fiber and digestion, but they still have all of these symptoms. And that really is because dietitians can help you take the information that you know and that we know and turn it into a food recommendation that is actually going to work with your lifestyle. So, what the example I gave before about the walnuts and how you're killing two birds with one stone by getting more food and getting more omega 3s. Like, we're the people that know what that translates to in food form. I also think we are experts at figuring out what's a sustainable change for you. Just because you know something doesn't mean you're going to know how to change it in your life. We find this a lot where people they have all this information, but they don't know what to do with it. They don't know how to make it into a sustainable lifestyle practice. And as a dietitian, I can easily figure out, okay, this is your goal. These foods help you meet that goal. And here's how you can actually eat them. Like, I think that last step actually makes a big difference. Like, we can tell you to eat cruciferous veggies every day, but like, how? and and when and why and what makes sense. So it's really the personalized piece and making sure that the concepts are something that you can actually integrate into your life. People are surprised sometimes when they work with me. I might start with something very simple. Like, if someone
Well,
tells
that's what I
me,
love about you.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I will sometimes, if someone come in, this is just an example, but if someone comes in and says, I can never eat cruciferous vegetables, usually I'm trying to get them to add a little bit of cauliflower rice to a soup. And that is like
Yeah.
the first thing. Like, we start with very simple things. But that exposure over time, all of a sudden they're eating all these different things, and it's just about the texture and figuring that out. Like, we are experts in food, and yes, you can know the science, but if you don't know how to prepare the food and consume it in a way that's enjoyable to you, then you're not going to get those benefits at all. So,
I think that's one of your superpowers is thinking outside the box, listening to each person, what they like to do, what they don't like to do, what their lifestyle, their habits are like, and you thinking of all these different solutions and just continuing to make your way through all these suggestions until we find the secret sauce and the magic of what's going to work for somebody. I want to ask you about the community aspect of it. So, yes, you work a lot one to one with clients, and then you work on these group calls. And we have so many people that stay in our community for that group aspect, that community aspect that can't be replicated any other way, because Googling on your own at 11 o'clock at night in front of your device is quite a lonely endeavor. you know, you just feel really, really alone in that. And you and I are constantly amazed at the nourishment that people get from a group setting. So what is that like for you as a dietitian, not only working one to one with people, but also in that group setting? What have you noticed the big benefits for people being in that in learning in that way?
we can learn so much from each other. And sometimes speaking to someone else about about what they're experiencing and how that relates to what you're experiencing can trigger some of those light bulb moments. I have that all the time with my clients, even in one-on-one sessions. We're talking about something, and then they have an idea of something that worked for them, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to tell other people this, how it happened with this, and we just that community aspect is so helpful, and I do think it is comforting to be in a group where other people are going through the same thing as you, and maybe they're coming from different backgrounds and they have different life experiences and different reasons why they're here, but you're all learning the same information and taking those life experiences along with that, and how that affects your experience with the program. I think it's really powerful, actually. Like, we have people sharing all kinds of information that we wouldn't be able to come up with all of
Yeah.
this ourselves.
It's
And so,
it's so true, isn't it?
yeah,
And I love it when the members that have been in our community for a long time, they really take ownership of it. and really feel great about sharing what has worked for them and what continues to work for them, and that we're all taking responsibility for teaching and learning together. As you just pointed out, it's a really lovely thing. Again, I could talk to you about this all day long, but we'll pick it up in our call with the community next week. So thank you
Yeah,
so much.
yeah. Thank you.
So many great takeaways. The importance of better gut health and how our gut, our blood sugar, our hormones, and metabolism are all connected. And having that beautiful, balanced, joyful relationship with food, that it's not about what you take away, it's about what you add. That instead of narrowing your choices, you want to open them up. And I think that's one of the things that Megan teaches so beautifully as a dietitian, that we only want to be restricting what we're eating if restriction is necessary. We see a lot of people come into our community who feel very paralyzed about their food choices because they don't feel good. So they come with a long list of foods that they can't eat, and it may not necessarily be the case. It was interesting what she was saying about disordered eating patterns extending beyond anorexia and bulimia, that many of us are engaged in behaviors that are getting in the way of our better health. So, yo-yo dieting, binging, restricting, only eating one meal a day, obsessing about our calories, and only eating clean foods can be getting in the way of our better health goals. We see a lot of people undernourishing themselves, and it causes all kinds of issues. As she was saying, not eating enough causes a downregulation of hormones, and everything slows down: your digestion, your metabolism, energy production, brain function. Fascinating what she was saying about the relationship between not eating enough potentially causing the development of autoimmune disease, particularly Hashimoto's and Graves'. And one of the great things about having Megan at the Celiac Disease Foundation is that's the autoimmune condition where we know the trigger. It's gluten. So they're using the research that they're doing with celiac disease as a gateway to looking at links and causes with other autoimmune conditions. And she's always sharing all of that fascinating research that's developing in our community, which is great. Also, so interesting about the symptoms of not eating enough. Some of them being feeling full very quickly, bloating, abdominal pain, constipation, where we typically associate those things with eating too much or eating the wrong foods. It may just not be eating enough. And I love the way that she reframes snacking, that it doesn't have to be a snack food. It could be a few bites of a main meal. And when we're snacking on things that are quality foods, it's actually very, very good for regulating blood sugar and hormone production. Taking note of those strategic foods she talked about that are great for better hormone health. So eating all those fantastic plants, probiotic rich fermented foods, foods that are rich in omega-3s, the cruciferous veggies, and the importance of protein. That was the missing piece for me when I was in perimenopause, and is the missing piece for most women in our community. Many of the people that we work with are not even getting half the protein that they need, and it is an absolute game changer. So understanding what's appropriate for you and your needs can really support better health at any age, but during perimenopause and menopause, it's just an absolute game changer. There is a real difference between simply eating healthy and eating strategically for your needs. That bio-individual nutrition piece is really, really important. I also just love really focusing on the relationship between stress and exercise and hormones. How she connected the dots with the production of serotonin in the gut, and how just noticing elevated stress and figuring out ways to manage your stress is so important. And one of the ways that we combat stress is with strategic eating and getting enough sleep, exercising, and so forth. The exercise piece was interesting for me because I just realized that I could exercise differently as I aged, and just listening to your body and how important that is, as Megan said, for hormone receptiveness. That physical activity makes your cells more insulin sensitive. So many women get diagnosed with blood sugar issues going into perimenopause and menopause. And as you age, and insulin is a hormone, and it's the shuttle that gets the sugar from the blood into the cells where you can use it for energy, and you want that system to be working efficiently. And just taking notice of the research that's coming out about Ozempic and other GLP-1 injections, that they may help you lose weight in the short term, but much of the weight is muscle. And so long term, it's causing metabolic issues and certainly puts you at risk for poor bone health. You need your muscles to hold your bones in place. It's like the scaffolding, as Meghan said. And so you can be at a higher risk for osteoporosis, fractures, injuries, and so forth. So I hope some of these tips from Meghan were helpful. Those of you that are in our SK60 community, you know Meghan very well and how fabulous she is. And if you're thinking of joining the next group of our 60-day reset, talking to her here just gives you a little bit of a sense of what it's like on our weekly Q&A calls with her. She's very approachable and makes everything very simple and relatable. So if you want to join the next 60-day reset, we'd love to have you and get to know you and help you come up with some solutions that are going to work for your lifestyle and personality and help you achieve your health goals. You can learn more at ithastobeme.com/reset. I want to hear about your It Has To Be Me story. So head on over to ithastobeme.com/stories to share it in our free community. You can also join the conversations we're having about this episode and others. I'm Tess Masters. Join me next week and we'll dive inside another great story to help us go from dreaming to doing.